Chief Researcher Valoran stood before the massive observation window of the Zinthar mothership, his elongated fingers clasped behind his back as he watched Earth rotate slowly beneath them. The planet's swirling blue-white atmosphere concealed what he considered the galaxy's most perplexing mystery. How had such an emotionally volatile species managed to achieve interstellar travel in mere centuries, while other races took millennia? Collection teams are in position. Chief Researcher. His assistant, Kelmar, reported from the curved control panel. All 12 targets have been identified and marked. Valoran's inner eyelids flickered with satisfaction. Proceed with extraction. Remember, minimal disruption. We want pure specimens, uncontaminated by excess stress hormones. Across Earth's darkened hemisphere, 12 Zinthar stealth pods descended through the atmosphere. Their quantum-shifted hulls passed through clouds without disturbing them, leaving not so much as a radar shadow. Each pod carried a 3-member collection team, equipped with the finest containment and sedation technology the collective possessed. In Singapore, Sarah Chen sat on her family's 20th floor balcony, telescope aimed at Saturn's rings. The 10-year-old prodigy had already mapped every crater on the Moon visible from Earth and was working on cataloging the gas giant's satellites. She never saw the shimmer in the air behind her. In Moscow, Dmitry Volkov practiced picking the lock on his own bedroom door. Again, his father, a security consultant, had installed increasingly complex mechanisms to challenge the 8-year-old's growing skills. The boy failed to notice the temperature drop 3 degrees as a cloaked figure materialized in the corner. In Lagos, Adana Okoro lay beneath her father's hover car, rewiring the antigrav stabilizers. At 12, she could diagnose any mechanical problem by sound alone. The soft hum of the collection team's neurosuppressors blended perfectly with the garage's ambient noise. One by one, the children vanished. The Zinthar teams moved with perfect efficiency, using targeted neural pulses to prevent screams and ensure compliance. Sarah's telescope clattered to the balcony floor. Dmitry's lockpicks scattered across his carpet. Adana's tools rolled under the hover car. Valoran watched the feeds with growing excitement as each child was teleported directly into a separate holding cell aboard the mothership. Their vital signs appeared on his monitors: elevated heart rates, surging adrenaline, but all within acceptable parameters for specimen preservation. Initial scans indicate successful neural pattern preservation, Kelmar reported. No memory contamination from the extraction process. Excellent. Valoran moved to the central observation chamber, where feeds from all 12 cells displayed on the curved walls. Begin acclimation procedures. I want them ready for preliminary tests within 6 standard hours. He studied each child's response to awakening in the cells. Some cried. Others immediately began exploring their confines. A few sat in complete stillness, eyes darting, clearly analyzing their situation. Such fascinating variance in behavioral patterns. Sir, Kelmar's voice carried an unfamiliar note. The human designated Sarah Chen. She's doing something unusual. Valoran focused on her cell feed. The girl had walked directly to the center of the room, looked straight up at the hidden camera, and smiled. Not a smile of fear or confusion, but one of absolute certainty. Then she spoke, her words translated instantly by the ship's systems. You really should have studied our stories before doing this, especially the ones about what happens to people who take human children. Valoran felt an unexpected chill along his spine ridge. In all his centuries of xenological research, he had never seen a specimen display such awareness, such confidence. Begin the testing sequence immediately, he ordered. I want to know what makes these human children so different. He had no way of knowing he had just initiated the greatest catastrophe in Zinthar history, all because he had failed to understand a simple truth. Humans don't just love their children, they would burn down the galaxy to protect them. Valoran's research facility had studied thousands of species young over the centuries. Standard procedure was simple. Specimens would cry, huddle, eventually succumb to exhaustion. The subsequent stress reactions would provide valuable baseline data for understanding species development. These human children weren't following the protocol. "Sir, they're organizing," Kelmar reported, mandibles twitching with confusion. The barrier between cells A and B has registered 18 attempts at communication through vibration patterns. Through the observation window, Valoran watched as Sarah Chen systematically tapped along the wall she shared with Dmitri's cell. The Moscow boy immediately responded, using what appeared to be an archaic human communication method called Morse code. They've been in captivity for less than 6 hours, Valoran noted, recording his observations. No species we've studied has ever attempted cooperative behavior this quickly. Fascinating. In her cell, Adana had dismantled the food dispenser, spreading its components across the floor in what seemed like random patterns. But Valoran noticed how she positioned each piece precisely where the cell's surveillance would capture it clearly, as if she wanted them to see. "Sir," another researcher called out, "the specimens in cells D through F have begun what appears to be a coordinated sound pattern." 3 of the children had started singing, their voices carrying through the ventilation system. The song was simple, repetitive, something about a star and twinkling. Within minutes, all 12 cells resonated with the melody. "They're mapping the acoustics," Valoran realized, his inner eyelids flickering rapidly. "Using sound propagation to understand the facility's layout. But how did they coordinate this? We haven't allowed any direct communication." Sarah Chen's voice cut through his thoughts, speaking clearly to the hidden camera. "We don't need to see each other to work together. That's what you don't understand about humans. We're never really alone." Valoran felt that same unsettling chill from earlier. The girl shouldn't know where the cameras were, shouldn't be able to deduce the observation patterns, shouldn't be displaying this level of strategic thinking. "Increase neural suppression by 15%, he ordered. "They're obviously still too alert." "Sir," Kelmar's voice carried an edge of concern. "Neural suppression has been at maximum safe levels since collection. They're resisting it somehow." The observation chamber's displays showed all 12 children now working in apparent synchronization. Dmitri had begun teaching others his lock-picking techniques through the wall-tapping code. Adana's dismantled components were being replicated in other cells, creating what looked like circuit diagrams. Sarah had transformed her food wrapper into an intricate folded structure that bore an uncomfortable resemblance to the facility's layout. "Look at their stress hormones," a junior researcher noted with growing alarm. "They're not elevating. If anything, they're showing increased focus and determination." Valoran studied the data scrolling across his screens. Every baseline, every prediction, every standard response pattern was being systematically shattered. These children weren't just adapting to captivity. They were treating it like a challenge to be overcome. "Sir," Kelmar's voice had dropped to a whisper. "They've started something new." Through the facility's speakers came the sound of 12 young voices, no longer singing but reciting in perfect unison. "We are the children of Earth. We are never defeated. We are never alone. And you have made a terrible mistake." Valoran felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of research: doubt. For the first time, He wondered if perhaps they had miscalculated in choosing such young specimens. Not because they were too weak, but because they were somehow, impossibly, stronger than anyone had imagined. Maximum security protocols, he ordered. Now. But watching Sarah Chen's confident smile, he had a sinking feeling it was already too late. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when Earth's entire communications network shifted to military protocols simultaneously, without any government authorization. Valoran stood before the Zinthar High Council, his research data forgotten as they watched the unprecedented events unfold on Earth. Private corporations, criminal organizations, and military forces worldwide were abandoning their conflicts and rivalries in a synchronized dance of cooperation that should have been impossible. "Explain," demanded High Councillor Rickstall, all four eyes fixed on the orbital feeds. "I cannot," Valoran admitted. "Their response pattern defies all previous behavioral models. The humans aren't just cooperating, they're moving as one entity. In orbit around Earth, commercial satellites suddenly realigned, creating a planet-wide surveillance network. Traffic control systems rerouted thousands of vehicles, clearing paths to military bases and spacecraft facilities. Prison gates opened across continents, releasing very specific inmates, those with military backgrounds, engineering expertise, or space combat experience. "They're not negotiating," Kelmar observed, checking the incoming transmission logs. "Not one diplomatic channel has been activated. No demands, no threats. They're just moving." The High Council chamber fell silent as they watched Earth's response unfold. Corporate rivals shared proprietary technology. Military adversaries exchanged classified intelligence. Criminal empires emptied their vaults to fund the rapidly assembling fleet. "Impossible," whispered a council member. "Their species hasn't achieved collective consciousness. This level of coordination shouldn't exist." A transmission cut through all frequencies, broadcasting on every channel simultaneously. The message was simple, repeated in every human language. "You took our children. There will be nowhere in this galaxy you can hide." Their ship production facilities, Kelmar reported, mandibles clicking rapidly. There, every shipyard on Earth has begun emergency manufacturing. But the designs, they're not following any known patterns. The screen showed massive ships taking shape, hybrids of military, civilian, and even theoretical technologies. Vessels that shouldn't have been possible were being assembled by crews working with impossible precision and speed. "We've detected quantum signatures," another researcher announced. "Hidden fleets, pirates, smugglers. They're all converging on Earth's coordinates." Valoran watched as ships of every description emerged from hyperspace. Sleek military cruisers, rugged mining vessels, notorious pirate flagships. Each one immediately fell into formation with the others, creating an armada that grew by the minute. "High Council," Valoran's voice shook slightly. "I believe we may have made an error in our specimen selection protocols." "Elaborate," Rickstall demanded. "Our species abandoned emotional attachment to offspring millions of years ago. We deemed it evolutionary weakness. But these humans," he gestured at the screens, where the fleet had grown to unprecedented size. "They've turned that attachment into a force that's reshaping reality itself." A new message reached them, this time from the Galactic Council. "The Zinthar Collective is hereby advised. You have violated the most sacred law of humanity. They do not seek diplomacy. They do not seek resolution. Every human ship in the galaxy now moves with one purpose, the return of their young. May whatever gods you worship have mercy on your souls." Valoran looked back at his research data, seeing it with new eyes. The children's confidence, their coordination, their lack of fear. It all made sense now. They knew, somehow, what their species was capable of. They understood what was coming. "High Council," he said quietly, "I suggest we prepare for something unprecedented. The humans aren't just coming to rescue their children. They're coming to teach us why taking them was the greatest mistake our species has ever made." Valoran paced in the Galactic Council's private chamber, his typically smooth movements now sharp with agitation. Before him, representatives from 17 advanced civilizations watched Earth's fleet movements with growing concern. "You must understand," Valoran insisted, gesturing at his research displays. "This response is completely disproportionate. We followed all standard protocols for specimen collection. The subjects are unharmed, well-fed, and providing invaluable scientific data. The Arcadian representative, an ancient being of pure energy, pulsed with what might have been disappointment. You still don't comprehend the magnitude of your error, do you?" Error. Valoran's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. "We are the Zinthar Collective. We have studied thousands of species. Our methods are perfect. These humans are simply being irrational." "Show him," the Arcadian interrupted, addressing the Council's eye. The chamber's holographic display activated, showing scenes from Earth. Parents collapsed in grief outside their children's empty bedrooms. Communities mobilizing search parties. Humanity's most hardened criminals volunteering for suicide missions to breach Zinthar defenses. "I don't understand," Valoran admitted. "They can produce more offspring. These specimens are replaceable." A deep, resonant laugh echoed through the chamber. The Vrel ambassador, a species known for their own fierce protection of young, stepped forward. "Replaceable. Let me explain something about humans, researcher. They don't see children as specimens or resources. Each human child carries something they call potential, infinite possibilities of who they might become." The display shifted to historical footage. Humans rushing into burning buildings to save children. Soldiers diving on grenades to protect schools. Parents lifting vehicles off trapped young ones with seemingly impossible strength. Every human child, the Vrel continued, is seen as unique, irreplaceable. They don't just love their offspring, they reshape their entire existence around protecting them. It's not genetic programming or evolutionary imperative. It's something else entirely. Valoran watched as the footage showed more scenes. Adults teaching children to read, to write, to dream. The careful patience, the absolute dedication, the fierce joy in every small achievement. "But that's so inefficient," he protested weakly. "The resources invested, the emotional energy expended." "Now you begin to understand why they call you insane," the Arcadian pulsed. "You took their children thinking you were collecting specimens. Instead, you've triggered something that their own mythology has warned about for millennia." The chamber's displays showed ancient human stories. Tales of parents moving mountains to rescue children, of armies falling before a mother's wrath, of civilizations burning for harming a single child. "You didn't collect specimens," the Vrel ambassador said softly. "You took their most precious treasures, their hopes for the future, their very reason for existence. And now they come, not as a species or a military force, but as parents. Do you know what that means?" Valoran shook his head slowly. "It means," the ambassador continued, "that they won't stop. They won't negotiate. They won't show mercy. Every human ship approaching your space carries beings who would gladly die to save one child. Not for strategy or species survival, but for love, a force your kind abandoned aeons ago. The chamber fell silent as new reports arrived. The human fleet had grown larger still, now including ships from species who had witnessed humanity's dedication to their young and chosen to stand with them. Valoran finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. What? What do we do? The Arcadians' glow dimmed slightly. Pray, return their children, and prepare your species for a lesson about what you've forgotten, the true power of parental love. The Vrel ambassador added softly, and hope they forgive you. Though after taking their children, I doubt they ever will. Sarah Chen stood in the center of her cell, eyes closed, listening to the vibrations traveling through the walls. Dmitri's tapping had become precise, musical almost. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Everything in position. 3 decks down. Adana's rewired food dispensers were ready. The other 9 children waited, each knowing their role in what Sarah had dubbed Operation Homework. Their neural patterns are stabilizing, a Zinthar technician reported to Valoran. Perhaps they're finally accepting their situation. Valoran studied the monitors, unease creeping through his spine ridge. The children had stopped their constant activities, settling into what appeared to be quiet contemplation. All 12 of them simultaneously. 2 simultaneously. Sarah opened her eyes and smiled directly at the hidden camera. You know what's funny? Adults always underestimate how much we learn from games. The first system crashed exactly 3 seconds later. Sir, Kelmar's mandibles clattered in alarm. Cell block environmental controls are malfunctioning. Temperature regulators are. They're cycling in some kind of pattern. Valoran rushed to the display. The temperature shifts were indeed following a sequence, rising and falling in precise intervals. Almost like static electricity, he whispered, finally understanding. They're generating static charges from the temperature differentials. In her cell, Adana pressed the final makeshift conductor into place, a circuit board crafted from food dispenser parts and woven blanket fibers. The static charge built up in all 12 cells, guided by the children's precisely arranged metallic components. Hide and seek. Sarah's voice came through the speakers again. Tag. Capture the flag. Humans don't just play games, you know. We practice. The static discharge hit every force field simultaneously. 12 containment barriers flickered, failed, and died. Security teams to all cells. Valoran shouted. Full lockdown protocol. But the children were already moving. Years of playground games had taught them how to run, hide, squeeze through tight spaces. Dmitri's lock-picking skills, practiced on every toy box and diary since he was 6, made quick work of the mechanical backups. Sir, we're detecting unauthorized access in the ventilation system, a security officer reported. Impossible, Valoran insisted. The access points are too small for. He trailed off, remembering too late that he'd specifically chosen young specimens for their compact size. The very thing that had made them attractive research subjects now made them perfect infiltrators. Through the maintenance tunnels they crawled, following the map Sarah had memorized from studying the reflections in her cell's polished floor. Adana's knowledge of ship systems, gained from years of helping in her mother's repair shop, guided them to critical junction points. They're disabling security nodes, Kelmar reported, his usual calm shattered. But the access panels, they're still sealed. How are they? The songs, Valoran realized, the constant singing. They weren't mapping the facility. They were testing acoustic resonance points, finding the exact frequencies too. A high, clear note rang through the ship's corridors. 12 young voices in perfect harmony. Security panels vibrated, shook, and cracked. Humans evolved singing to communicate over long distances. Sarah's voice echoed from somewhere in the walls. To coordinate hunting parties, to warn of danger, to celebrate victory. Alarms blared as system after system failed. The children moved like smoke through the ship's infrastructure, 12 shadows playing the galaxy's most elaborate game of hide and seek. We're not just test subjects, Sarah continued, her voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. We're the descendants of survivors, of hunters, of warriors, and you put us in a playground built to your specifications. Valoran stared at the chaos unfolding on his monitors, finally understanding the true magnitude of his miscalculation. He hadn't captured specimens. He'd given human children a puzzle to solve, and they'd spent their whole lives preparing for exactly this kind of game. The Zinthar mothership hung in space, its sleek silver hull now marred by flickering systems and erratic power signatures. On the bridge, Valoran watched as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, not in traditional military formation, but in something far more terrifying, a parent's desperate rush to reach their child. Incoming transmission, Kelmar announced, his voice trembling. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, including ones we thought were secure. The main screen activated, showing not a military commander or government official, but a single human mother. Sarah Chen's mother. Her eyes held no hatred, no rage, only the calm certainty of someone who had already decided how far they would go. My daughter, she said softly, taught herself to memorize star patterns at age 6. She learned your ship's layout the same way she learned constellations, by seeing patterns in reflections. Did you think that was normal for our children? Another screen lit up. Dimitri's father, surrounded by what appeared to be Earth's most notorious criminal hackers. My son picked his first lock at age 4. He's never met a puzzle he couldn't solve. Did you think that was just chance? A third transmission. Adana's mother, standing in what looked like a jury-rigged engineering bay. Behind her, former enemies worked together, modifying ships with impossible technologies. My daughter rebuilt her first engine at age 7. She sees machines the way you see simple mathematics. Did you think we didn't know what our children were capable of? Valoran's inner eyelids flickered rapidly as more transmissions poured in. Parents, siblings, teachers, all broadcasting the same message. They had always known their children were extraordinary. They had nurtured those gifts, not for scientific progress or species advancement, but for the pure joy of watching young minds grow. Sir, Kelmar interrupted, the fleet. They're not attacking. Indeed, the vast armada had arranged itself in a sphere around the mothership, engines dark. Then came the broadcast that would be studied by xenologists for centuries. Every human ship began transmitting their children's stories. Sarah's first telescope, Dimitri's lock-picking competitions, Adana's repair shop victories, birthdays, school plays, skinned knees and midnight comforts. A million moments of love, pride, and unwavering support. You took our children thinking they were specimens, Sarah's mother continued. But each one of them is a universe of possibilities. Each laugh, each tear, each triumph and failure. They're all part of something you can't measure in your laboratories. The Galactic Council's observation feeds showed species across the galaxy watching in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated a power greater than any weapon, the pure, unrelenting force of parental love. We're not here to destroy you, Dimitri's father added. We're here to show you what you've forgotten. Every child is a miracle. Every parent is a guardian of infinite potential. And you never, ever take someone else's miracle. Inside the mothership, 12 children moved through the shadows, their steps guided by years of games, love, and careful nurturing. They weren't just escaping. They were teaching the Zinthar a lesson about what children could become when surrounded by unconditional love. Valoran stood before his screens, watching as the most powerful fleet ever assembled hung motionless in space, broadcasting not threats of destruction, but stories of bedtime songs and first steps. And finally, he understood. The humans hadn't gathered this armada to wage war. They had come to share the most fundamental truth their species had ever learned, that the sound of a child's laughter was worth more than all the scientific knowledge in the galaxy. The revolution wouldn't be fought with weapons. It would be won with love stories, told by parents who had moved heaven and earth just to see their children smile again. The Zinthar mothership's neural network was never designed to handle human emotions. As thousands of parent stories flooded through its communication systems, something unprecedented began to occur. The ship's semi-organic processors, attempting to analyze and categorize the overwhelming flood of emotional data, started to change. Valoran felt it first, a strange sensation in his chest as he watched a recording of Sarachen's first astronomy presentation. What is happening to me?" he whispered, pressing a hand against his thoracic cavity. "Sir," Kelmar's voice cracked with unfamiliar emotion, "the crew, they're experiencing memories. Genetic memories we thought were purged millions of years ago." Through the ship's corridors, Zinthar crew members stopped at their stations, overwhelmed by ancient neural patterns awakening in their DNA. Memories of their species past, when they too had sung to their young, had watched first steps with pride, had known the fierce joy of nurturing new life. Sarah's voice came through the ship's speakers, but this time it was different. Not the voice of a tactical genius coordinating an escape, but of a child reaching out in understanding. "Your species forgot how to love your children, but we can help you remember." In the maintenance tunnels, 12 children began to sing. Not the precise frequencies they'd used to crack security systems, but something older, deeper, lullabies from a dozen different cultures, songs that had soothed young ones to sleep since humanity's earliest days. The ship's neural network, already saturated with parental stories from the fleet, resonated with the children's songs. Each note carried centuries of human emotional evolution, of parents learning and relearning how to care for their young. The genetic block, Valoran gasped, understanding flooding his enhanced mind. Our ancestors, they didn't eliminate parental bonds because they were weak. They blocked them because they were too strong, too overwhelming. They thought they had to choose between scientific progress and emotional attachment. Through the ship's corridors, Zinthar crew members began to weep, a biological function their species hadn't expressed in millennia. The neural network pulsed with awakening emotions, carrying the change from deck to deck like a benevolent virus. Mitri's voice joined the song next, followed by Adana's. "We forgive you," they sang in harmony. "You forgot, but now you remember. Every child needs love to grow. Every parent needs a child to love." Valoran found himself moving through the ship, drawn not by duty or scientific curiosity, but by something deeper. He found the children in the central processing core, their songs interfacing directly with the ship's organic computers. Sarah stepped forward, looking at him not as a captive or an escapee, but as a teacher watching a student finally grasp a difficult lesson. "Your species has been amazing parents before," she said softly. "You can be again." The ship's lights flickered as millennia of suppressed genetic memory surfaced through its neural network. Across every deck, Zinthar crew members experienced their first paternal and maternal instincts in countless generations. "We could have escaped hours ago," Sarah explained, gesturing to her fellow children, each of them watching the transformation with knowing smiles. But we stay to help you remember, because that's what humans do. We help others learn how to love. Valoran sank to his knees, overwhelmed by emotions he had no words to describe. Through the ship's communications, he could hear his entire crew experiencing the same awakening. Centuries of cold scientific detachment melted away, replaced by something warmer, stronger, more vital. "Welcome back," Sarah said, placing her small hand on his shoulder. "To the part of you that knows how to love children. The part that makes everything else worth doing." And throughout the ship, for the first time in millions of years, Zinthar voices began to sing. 10 years after what became known as the Great Awakening, Valoran stood before the Galactic Council again. This time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Sarah Chen, now 22 and serving as Earth's ambassador to the reformed Zinthar Collective. But more importantly, a young Zinthar child clung to his hand. His daughter, the first natural-born Zinthar in millions of years. The transformation of our species, Valoran addressed the council, his voice carrying the warmth that had become characteristic of his people, wasn't just biological, it was fundamental. We had to relearn everything: how to nurture, how to teach, how to love. Sarah stepped forward, her diplomatic robes bearing both Earth and Zinthar symbols. The other children and I never left after the awakening. How could we? We had just gained an entire civilization of new students, eager to learn the most important lesson humanity had to offer. The council chamber's displays showed scenes from the past decade. Zinthar scientists converting research facilities into schools, former specimen containment cells transformed into playrooms. Dmitri had stayed to teach the art of problem-solving through play. Adana had helped design new living quarters meant for families, not just efficient housing units. The neural network that once made us perfect researchers, Valoran continued, lifting his daughter to his shoulders, now carries the collected parental wisdom of both our species. Every Zinthar child born today enters a world of infinite love and possibility. The council watched in amazement as recent footage played. Zinthar parents singing their children to sleep with harmonies that blended their ancient songs with human lullabies. Young ones of both species playing together in gardens that had once been sterile laboratories. But the most remarkable change, Sarah added, smiling as Valoran's daughter reached for her hand, wasn't in the Zinthar. It was in humanity's understanding of our own strength. We had always known we would do anything for our children. Now we knew we could do something even more powerful. We could teach others to do the same. Through the chamber's windows, Earth's ships could be seen docked alongside Zinthar vessels. But they no longer carried weapons or armies. Instead, they transported teachers, parents and children, all part of the new cultural exchange initiative. 10 years ago, Valoran said softly, I thought we were conducting the most important research in our history. I was right, but not in the way I imagined. We didn't learn about humanity's scientific advancement or genetic potential. We learned about love, the force that drives all human progress. Sarah reached up to touch the necklace she wore, a piece of the original cell's force field crystal, now a symbol of how barriers between species could transform into bridges. The children you took as specimens became your teachers. The parents who came to rescue us became your guides. And the power you thought was our weakness became your salvation. Valoran's daughter chirped happily, a sound that would have been impossible in the old collective. We no longer study other species, he concluded. We learn from them. We grow with them. And most importantly, we raise our children to do the same. The council chamber erupted in applause, a human gesture that many species had adopted over the past decade. As the sound faded, A simple melody began to fill the air. Human and Zinthar voices joined together in the song that had started it all, the lullaby that had awakened a species' heart. And in the back of the chamber, 12 empty specimen containers stood transformed into planters, growing flowers from both Earth and Zinthar, their colours blending into something entirely new, just like the civilizations that had learned to grow together.